Hey, oncers! It's Minx from Average Geek, and I'm here with your review for episode 3 of season 5 of Once Upon a Time. If you have not seen episode 3, go to watchabc.com and watch it now, or whichever way you actually choose to watch it, um, and watch that before you actually watch the rest of this video. That is the only disclaimer you're going to get. There's a lot of stuff to cover, so this video is probably going to be slightly longer than the others, but I'm going to try and keep it somewhat close. My first run of this video went over a half an hour, and I don't want to make you guys sit here for that long, so I'm going to shoot for the same time, but we'll see how we go. Alright, with that said, let's jump in. As typical with Once Upon a Time episodes, there were two main stories that were parallel to each other, one taking place in Camelot, the other taking place in Storybrooke. There was also a nice little side plot that I'll get to later. The stories this time actually focused on Prince Charming, or David, and King Arthur. They pretty much had a buddy quest. There was some good moments in the episode, and there was also a few awkward moments and a few moments that could have been better. But they're all pretty much in contrast to each other. The buddy quest in Camelot concerned them going on a journey to fetch a magical ingredient that would allow Regina to potentially speak to Merlin inside the tree, or if he is the tree. It essentially was to fetch a mushroom, a toadstool. It was a poisonous mushroom. It was called a crimson cap. And yeah, that pretty much means they were gonna, eat do some shrooms to talk via, drug use. There were some great action scenes involved with that particular thing. There was also some interesting things that happened towards the end, including a huge WTF moment, which I'll get to shortly. The Storybrooke buddy quest involved the two of them pairing up to catch a thief who had stolen a bunch of magical items out of the Camelot reliquary, which I would casually describe as a chest full of magical crap that Camelot has been hoarding for Lord knows how long. Among them is a torch, which is I believe, the Eternal Flame. The torch itself was really awesome looking, very gothic. I loved it. It was a great touch, kind of foreboding actually, but I really enjoyed that little thing, as well as other things, and supposedly housed a magic bean that was supposed to get them all back to Camelot. Side note, I hate that fact. I hate that they had to resort to a plot device involving another frickin' magic bean. If you've been paying attention at all through the past seasons, you'll know that the amount of magic beans in existence is finite. There is a limit. And, like, the two last ones, I believe, was the one that Balefire used to get to our world, and the other one was used, I think it was with Emma and Hook when they had to, like, climb the beanstalk or whatever. That's it. That was supposed to be the last of them. The fact that there might be another one in existence is kind of hooey. I didn't believe it for a second. And I hate the fact that they, once again, relied on a goddamn magic bean. With that said, I felt like it was typical buddy quest. Two guys, bonding as they journey to fetch something awesome and cool that could save the day. There was a minor pissing match over whose chick was best. Who was she was good with a bow. Oh, so was mine. Oh, they're really good with this. Oh, so was mine. She's really awesome with this. She's probably the nicest person I know. Please. And let's face it, Gwen's shady. I would take Snow any day. And I don't even really care for Snow and Charming, but I would still take her ass any day. I've seen her be a badass. When she's Snow, she's a badass. When she's Mary Margaret, not so much, but that's another story. Slight pissing match there. they get to the thing. Charming fetches the thing, tries to come back. Epic battle scene. Um, Essentially, right before the mushroom, the path leading up to the mushroom, which is usually about when you get to the, hero's trial in any kind of, quest like this. There's like a water or a moat, and there's planks of wood across it. If you've ever seen a ninja movie that involves like ninja training at all, you'll often see them on a body of water, and there's uh, planks across the surface, and the goal is to run across it as fast as possible so that you don't fall in, or you don't, sink down. Similar concept is how I read this, but it looked more like an actual bridge. It just, the pieces sunk a bit. He actually almost fell in once on the way there. About halfway back, a bunch of old armor formed itself into phantom knights. All I can assume is that this is the leftover armor and potentially the spirits of former knights and heroes who probably failed on their similar quests. They start fighting, Prince Charming. He, of course, fights back all gallantly. A couple of times they reanimate themselves, but finally he pretty much, punts, the helmets across the frickin' lake, and they finally crumple down. He almost makes it off the thing, and he gets tripped up by one of the Phantom Knight hands and falls in the water, which completely expected. Starts getting drugged down. He's fighting. It's getting to the point he's probably going to lose air soon. Next thing you know, you see the silhouette of Arthur above him, and, the thrusting of the hand into the water, and grabs him and hauls him up and, helps him off the rest of the bridge, and they kind of collapse at the end, and they're, having that talking moment. I loved the fight scene. I loved the look of the Phantom Knights. I think it was great. It was probably entirely CGI, but it was the kind of CGI that didn't look CGI. It actually looked more like practical effect than CGI, which it very well might have been, but I doubt it, given their track record. The thing that bothers me is that it didn't even occur to Charming that Arthur knew this was going to happen. Before he even started across the bridge, they were talking about it, and he tested it, and he goes, "Oh, there's no way two of us can make it across at the same time. This because it was sinking enough under, Charming's weight." And Arthur didn't even put up a fight when Charming said that he was going to go do it. Didn't even. He goes, "Well, go ahead then." Completely let him do it. Then he ends up helping him across the last quarter of this bridge. There was no problem with either of their weights. Because he was practically carrying, a very soaking wet Prince Charming. I mean, yeah, I get that he was wearing leather, but I don't know. It seemed a little sketchy to me. But Charming being who he is, of course, he's going to be very trusting. As per, I don't know, I guess quest luck, the mushroom has disappeared. He doesn't have it anymore. They end up returning empty-handed. Upon returning, he actually gets knighted by Arthur and named to the Round Table. So he's now a Knight of the Round Table, in addition to being a prince of wherever the hell. And instead of taking Sir Percival's spot, he actually ends up taking Lancelot's spot, which is actually really, really important, because prior to their little buddy quest, they had actually discussed Lancelot, and they had discussed that his chair was different than the others because Arthur had considered him the Knight of the Purest Heart, which I know enough about Arthurian legend and how he's been presented in the past to have issues with that statement. But we'll get to that later. He actually gets waved over to there, so he's like, you're the only guy I feel I can trust, and you totally deserve it. So he takes a place in Lancelot's chair. Because of the baby getting fussy, at this same time, Mary Margaret has to leave the room to try and get the baby calmed down. Understandable, mother instinct and whatnot. The WTF moment is that Lancelot is very much alive. And he comes bearing a warning for Mary Margaret that Arthur is not who he appears to be and very much might be the villain. I was calling that from the first episode because from the first episode, Arthur seemed shady as shit. There isn't really much else to say about that. That confirmed pretty much what I thought. The only potential thing with Lancelot showing up is, how is he alive? Is this really Lancelot? Like, he insists it's really him, but, we've been fooled before. And if it's not really Lancelot, who is it? I believe it's really Lancelot, but if it's not, I think it's Merlin. Like, if it's not really Lancelot, I'll be surprised, and it would be Merlin for me. I don't think it would be anybody else. That is quickly followed up by another scene in Storybrooke that confirms Lancelot's words. Now, the playing out of the Storybrooke side of the parallel story, David and Arthur are searching for this thief. Turns out to be Arthur's squire, Griff. There's a chase scene, which I didn't really care for. I didn't feel it as believable, especially the end of the chase scene. Essentially, it ended with them chasing this poor kid who's on a horse with David's truck, and they end up facing each other. And David actually picks up like a 2x4 or a 2x6 and literally like almost jousts him. And the kid's unarmed. He doesn't have a freaking lance of his own, and he hits him square in the chest, knocks him clean off his horse. Now the thing is, in medieval times when they were doing the jousting, a lot of the times the lances they used for the actual jousts weren't like solid lances that they would take into actual battle. A lot of them were built in a way that they would shatter. Because jousts were supposed to be, they were dangerous. They were still very dangerous. I mean, plenty of them died. But they were still designed so that, they would shatter and break. More people died not necessarily from being, fucking run through, but more because, like, giant splinters would end up, cutting the jugular or getting pierced in the eye. That sort of thing, or if somebody cheated. This guy got hit square in the chest, not wearing armor, going at a high rate of speed against a truck, and got hit square in the chest with a solid piece of wood. At the very least, he should have had broken ribs and coughing up blood because of a fucking punctured lung, if not dead. That scene was completely unbelievable. Not to mention the fact that he doesn't know the area he's in, like he might if it were Camelot. Where the hell did David's truck suddenly appear from? Because I didn't think he was driving that around at the time. On uneven ground, why wasn't the truck able to pick up more speed? Because it's most likely a four-wheel drive truck. I mean, questions. It pretty much leads to them finding the reliquary items, among which is the Crimson Cap, which David has a deja vu moment with, realizing I know this, I don't know why, but I know this, ends up taking it to Regina, where they've actually already found the same book that they were looking at in Camelot. So they kind of make connections there, that obviously there was something going on with this. So they figure out that they can make stuff happen. And then you get to the end or almost the end of the episode. It's like one of the last scenes. And Arthur actually comes to visit Griff in the jail, and you find out that he really is as bad as Lancelot was warning Mary Margaret. You find out Griff is absolutely loyal to Arthur, like, to a fault. It leads to his death, ultimately. That he was following Arthur's explicit instructions, and that Arthur is planning on turning Storybrooke into Camelot because they can't get back to Camelot. So he is definitely the villain, one of the villains for the season, which makes it even more likely that he is absolutely the reason that Emma fully went dark. He's so bad that he actually talked this poor kid into killing himself for the good of Camelot and to be a hero to Camelot. He ends up drinking Arabian viper venom, or poison made from such venom, and dies and disappears into a puff of smoke. If you remember back in one of the past seasons, when you actually see how Regina got rid of Snow White's dad, it was via Arabian vipers. I don't remember him disappearing in smoke, though, so maybe it's just a different way of how the body is ingesting it. So you actually find out that he is actually fucked up. On the side, there is, like I mentioned before, there is a side story going on along with the two parallels, and that is, of course, focusing on Emma. You can't have very many episodes in this season that don't have at least a little bit of Emma in it, because they are touting it as the Dark Swan. Most of it surrounds her trying to schmooze Hook and get him fully on her side, but it starts, the very first scene of the show is actually Emma, and it involves her throwing some shade at the dwarves as they're mining and stealing Happy's pickaxe. It's well known that dwarf pickaxes can break any rock, so of course she's going to try and use it on the stone that the sword is embedded in, and it breaks. The pickaxe, not the stone, obviously. And Head Rumple reminds her that it can break any rock, but it can't break through magic. So she's going to have to find another option. She's going to have to find that hero. She tries schmoozing Hook a bit, and fails. He rebuffs her again. One of the most emotional moments in the episode is when she actually asks him, "Do you love me?" And he looks like he's going to break down into tears. You can tell that every time she tries something like this, it's getting harder and harder for him to say no. And he looks at her and he says, "I loved you." Past tense. And you can see him break a little bit. And you actually see a slight crack in her armor. You see a slight chink appear in the solid Dark One veneer. And I think that's the first of many that will eventually happen. I think she'll get some from Henry, her parents, Regina. I think it's eventually going to crack her wide open. And like Head Rumple said, the one weakness the Dark Ones have always had is the ones that they love. With that said, one of the scenes I didn't particularly care for, and I think it's mostly because I particularly don't care for how they used a particular plot device, is the rose again. There's a scene towards the end where Belle comes into Granny's diner and she's carrying the fucking rose with her, and it's down to the last frickin' petal. This entire time, as revealed earlier in the episode, she's been searching for a particular item, any item that touched him before he became the Dark One, because she had found a spell that could awaken him. And she just wants him back. All of a sudden, all of the petals begin forming the rose again. They begin coming together, and she goes, "Oh my god, he's waking up." She rushes back to the shop, only to find that he's gone. Now, the petal part I didn't particularly care for, because I feel like the way they're using the rose as a plot device sucks. Especially because at this point, it's gone. Like, the entire point of it is over and done with. I feel like it's something they should have introduced earlier in the series, but alas, here we are. We end up finding out that Emma has wakened Gold using the very thing that Belle was searching for, which is something she actually pilfered from Hook after their conversation. During her conversation with Hook, he had the epiphany that he had actually become good. He had made the choice to become good, and it all spawned from when he had encountered Rumple before he became the Dark One, and had held a cutlass to his throat. And it was one of the biggest villain moments for him. And he realized that, he had been just a man trying to protect his family and keep it together, and he had denied him that. And that later, the Dark One had he'd become the Dark One. And, when he met Swan, he made the conscious effort to become good, and at this point he is good. He doesn't want to go back. Well, that cutlass was the last thing to touch Gold. So Emma jacks that, she wakes up Gold, and very specific word choices. She pretty much tells him, your heart doesn't have good or bad in it. It's a blank slate. You are literally of the purest heart. Now, does that sound like anything we've already gone over in this video? I think so. With that said, I do have my own theories, which I might get into if I have enough time. Line of the episode. There was a scene with Hook and Robin. Robin's staring at his phone. Hook makes kind of a jab at it, and he says, "Oh no, I'm looking at this." He goes, "It's a picture of up inside Zelina." The look of horror on Hook's face, and he's like, "Whoa, mate!" Is freaking priceless. And of course, Robin explains that it's a picture of the sonogram. But it's a picture of up inside Zelina is my winner for that. Overall, I give the episode a A-. It gets knocked down for a couple of scenes that didn't feel like they belonged, and also for the chase scene, which I felt wasn't realistic. Honestly, the things that I absolutely loved. I loved the "Do you love me" scene with Hook and Emma. It was a kick right in the feels. I loved the dark scene that really revealed what Arthur's capable of. I mean, he literally convinced a guy to kill himself for the betterment of their, world. The fact that Lancelot is alive and he knows the truth behind Arthur, which would explain why he's been gone. That was epic. That was a great WTF moment. Weak moments. There was a scene between Regina and Zelina that I felt was completely misplaced. It didn't agree with the tempo of the entire episode, and it was pretty much the only, random piece that even remotely involved that. Like, it made no freaking sense. The fact that they used a magic bean again as a plot device, even if it was a fake plot device, it was still there. There was also a scene following the opening scene when she stole the pickaxe, where the dwarves actually confront David and are pretty much threatening, if you don't do something about it, I will, or we will. It came off as Grumpy being grumpy and them just bitching, and there was no payoff, absolutely no payoff from that scene at the end of this. It's most likely a mild build-up to something later in the season, but honestly, it was completely misplaced, not with the tempo or anything like that. I thought the CGI and the effects were good because they were light and minimal and only helped the story instead of just, oh my god, look what we can do. So that's always a plus. So A-, solid A-, only dinged for a couple of small things. Tons of stuff in this episode. Again, line of the episode, It's a picture of Up inside Zelina, and that's it for the review. Let me know what you enjoyed in the episode down below in comments. If there's any questions you had about why I reviewed something a certain way, let me know. I respond to every comment, absolutely, or at least everyone I can get to. If there's anything I left out that you felt was important, put that below as well. As always, like, share, subscribe. Subscribe for your chance to get a subscription box of your very own. And later, oncers.